Hi there, this is another video talking about the update on November 16th. So on the screen here you see some new changes. The first one I'm going to talk about is the ChecksLeak object. We added a DuringCheck quick script, and this is kind of important because one of our customers, Boeing, realized that the operators can reopen vacuum lines during a checksum activity, and so that can only be overridden really by you running some script in the background. So what you're going to need to do from now on when you're doing a ChecksLeak object is you're going to need to program the DuringCheck script, and what you want to do in there is turn those vacuum lines to off. And what that does is that script runs each cycle while the script is actually running. That way, if the operator turns the vacuum line on, it'll immediately turn it back off. Now, the other thing that's important to do there, though, is in order for that to override completely that operator interaction, you're going to want to go in your tasker. You're going to want to move that integrity checks object up to the top here, right before output calc, and you'll also want to put a connect to next equal to true. So those two options are important in order to link the integrity checks with the output calc. That way, there's no way that the operator can override that set point between these two tasks. Okay, so there's two things: add your duration or during checks script, and then move that checks task above output calc and put a connect to next equal to true. So that's the first thing. Then we have screen trend object shade input. Okay, so a job that one of our engineers is on requested that on the trend screen, as it moves through the trending, if an alarm occurs, or in this case, if a defect occurs within that run, they want to have the entire trend turn red. And so what I did is provide a new capability, and we'll go to the trend screen right now. And basically, this is currently trending every five seconds. I'm going to clear this trend, and I've got a alarmed object or input here, which turns true and false. And so as this thing's trending, and let me zoom in here and you'll see this, as it's trending, I've got a button that turns that alarmed input to true. So once we turn it to true, you'll see it now turns that area pink. Okay, and once I turn it to false, it'll turn it back off. Okay, now what it's doing here is the requirement is if I go into my screen design and take a look at that trend object, you'll see that there's three new properties: shade input, shade criteria, and shade colors. So the shade input is the input name that you want to track. Shade criteria is basically, in this case, equal to true. If I put equal to false, it'll shade all the areas where it's false. Or I can use greater than, less than, if I want to shade on some analog value. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And again, I would recommend a lighter color, light pink or something like that. Now, along with that, there's the reporting trend, and to change that, there's some new options in the data analyze object. So at the very bottom of the data analyze now, we have shade input, shade criteria, and shade color. And in this case, I'm just going to show you that I can use an analog value. So I'm going to take RTC greater than 450, turn it to pink. I go into my reporting, I go to my trend, and sure enough, where RTC is greater than 450, I've got a pink line. Now you're going to see a small white area here. Unfortunately, I tried to get rid of that. There really was no easy way of getting rid of that. So there might be a little white border between that. And what it's doing is it's plotting if the new point meets the criteria. It fills that point up back to the previous point. So it basically goes backwards based on that, and you'll see that in your if you do want to use this. And this is for customers who. So what this means is you could have an alarmed object or input that turns to true whenever there's alarm in place. And then all they have to do is include that alarmed input on the trend, and it'll show those regions, which is kind of nice. So that's that option. Then we have, so I talked about screen trend data analysis. Screen trend icon, there's a bug fix on the trace line grid. That's a pretty minor thing. On the deviation alarm, there's a small change in the messaging when you use a deviation alarm. And the last thing is ChecksLeak object. There's a new start delay, and this was a request by Quickstep in Australia. And what this does is normally in an integrity check. So I'm going to go to my integrity checks screen here. So when I run an integrity check and I do a leak check, for instance, it's going to close the valves, take the initial reading, and then 30 seconds later, in this case, it's a 30-second leak check, it will open the valves up and take the last reading. Quickstep wanted to start the test, shut the valves, and then a delay period before taking the initial reading. So what we now have is a delay. So if we go to check leak, at the very bottom it says start delay. So I can now enter, let's say, in this case, 15 seconds. Now when I start that test, 15 seconds later, it'll actually take the initial readings. And so here you can see vacuum is dropping minus 26.2, minus 26, minus 25.8, right? So at 15 seconds, that'll be my initial readings will be at 15 seconds, and then the final reading will be at the end, which will be the 30-second. And what you'll see on the report is a little bit different. Okay, so here we are. We fail. We go into the report, and you're going to see it now says test started at this time, and it indicates initial readings taken at 15 seconds. Okay, so here are the start values, and you can see that the initial readings are not the ones that occurred at the beginning, but 15 seconds into that. Okay, and I think that's it. So good luck, and please download that and start using that. Okay, thanks. Bye.